March 18th, 2026 meeting of the Municipal Building Blue Ribbon Committee. Just quickly take the roll. Bashir.
Here.
And Mike Maloney, I believe, is on his way. John O'Leary.
Here.
Cameron Horak.
Present.
Peter Weeks.
Here.
Susan Sterry.
Here.
Rick Chelman. He has other work commitments. Renee Plummer.
Here.
Okay. And we have Councillor Bagley, Councillor Cook, and I, John Tabor. And from staff, we have Paul Beverly, Deputy City Manager, Peter Rice, DPW, Joe Almeida, Facilities Manager. JSA, we have North Sturdivant and Richard Morris. Wait.
From ADG, we have Rodney.
And Rodney from ADG.
Rodney!
Wait.
Mark is on there too from JSA.
Oh, there we go. Mark Muller.
I'll get him on.
So, Carl, you want to lead off?
Sure, so once you get through the approval of the minutes, JSA will walk through just the memo like they normally do and walk you through the additional concepts and your refinement of the concept that they were looking through.
Very smooth, Carl. Very nice. I bobbled the ball. Let's see, we have the minutes to approve. Has everybody had a chance to read them?
One, under the skylight section, it says potential leads. I think it should say potential leaks.
Yes, correct. That's correct. Also, any other changes? I noticed it said the Portsmouth room was not included, I believe, and it is included in the drawings. So, any other changes?
I'll move with those changes.
Okay.
My only other question is, why did we skip a meeting in August and May?
The August meeting, the reason we're skipping is we're meeting almost on the last day of July. So essentially, we're only still have a month between meetings there. And so it's really about the timing of the meetings, trying to make sure that there's plenty of time for them to complete work.
Well, we're going from April 29th to June 17th, so that's quite a ways.
It is quite a gap, but it would be, if we scheduled in May, we would be scheduling at the end of May. And then again, end of June. I think they're trying to split the difference, so there's plenty of time to get this work done.
I don't think we're meeting enough.
Well, we'll talk about, as we wrap up, we'll talk about what's ahead and,
Okay.
We'll have to counterbalance that with having significant, meaningful material to work.
Can I just ask him, why do you think we are not meeting enough?
Our charge when we all accepted the position, it led me to believe we were going to have more meetings than we've had, and we keep pushing things off. So, we charged to get a job done, let's get it done.
But was it last meeting, we had said something about perhaps 26, 27 is when this will finally end?
We're hoping to have the work done by our consultants starting to wrap up in the fall. And that's the goal. But they have to actually have time to complete the work and to present materials to us. And we don't want to waste anybody's time by calling people here to meet and then not have additional materials to offer or additional things to review. If we find that we have more to review, we can absolutely add a meeting. And I think that that's really important. We're happy to meet for more frequently if we have materials to review.
We're very good at canceling meetings. I'd rather have a meeting scheduled and cancel it than have no meeting scheduled.
Well, I think this is a deeper discussion than just getting the minutes approved. We have a motion on the floor.
Second.
Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye. I'd have to abstain since I wasn't at the last meeting.
Now,
Richard will walk us through some of the updates here and then walk you through the concepts as well. And again, I think, we wanted to make sure that you have something substantive before you meet, and we're trying to make sure that you've got this that as well. So you'll see that we're just going to walk you through to both the answers and the additional concepts that were created since the last time.
So like Carl said, just a brief update of what's been going on, what we're working on, and then into the concepts themselves. Since we last met, our primary focus was working on viable concepts B and C that pare down the square footage, as well as flushing those out more to verify that they actually work. Going from a spreadsheet exercise to actual space plan, and working with an existing building, we wanted to go to that next level to make sure that the space planning actually was viable, which was a helpful exercise and proved that we can make it work. Our focus today would be on primarily the municipal side of things. On the police side, that work is ongoing right now, and we'd review that in substance in our next meeting, but we want to have the opportunity to vet that with the PD and work through greater complexity in those spaces than on the municipal side.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question? Because I read all of this. It says calculated, the one about the gross, that we're figuring things on gross square foot right now. It's on this page in the column now. So calculated space needs have a grossing factor applied to determine gross square foot. Actual will be plus or minus.
Yes.
So, does that mean what does that mean? Like back to the studs, or does that mean as the room sit
So
down?
a grossing factor is what we use to account for corridors, thickness of walls, things like that. So let's say we're looking at an office space and we have 4 offices.
Right.
That each of those is 100 square feet, let's say. You need a corridor to get to the rooms, there's gonna be thickness of walls and things like that. So if it's 400 square feet of usable room space, the actual square footage might be 600 because you need the thickness for walls and structure and corridors. So what we do when we're doing this in the spreadsheet is we'll calculate all those rooms at a net usable square feet, and we do that grossing factor to account for all that
Yeah, all the
extra.
area, the total.
And then when we actually come to laying it out, sometimes it ends up being a little bit less than that. Sometimes it is a little bit more, but those grossing factors help get us in the right ballpark, I guess you could say.
Thank you.
And that's particularly the case when we're dealing with existing buildings and existing geometry. Some things work out really efficiently and well, some things don't. And that's where going to doing the next level like we're showing today with the room by room at a first pass was a helpful exercise because it proved out that our math was in
Added up.
some
Yeah.
sense of reality.
That's the beautiful column. For today.
Yeah, whether they're pretty or not.
It's 4 square feet of space. So what we'll do is, I guess I'll jump right into the schemes, and then as we talk about next steps, also the other things that are going on in the background that you don't see what we're working on, but they're in progress. Let's schemes. So when we spoke about concept A last meeting, obviously the big thing that jumped out during that meeting was the square footage of what we were proposing, which was about 12,000 additional 12,000 feet of new construction. We found that this would work for us. It solved all the adjacencies, and we felt comfortable that it could work. But it was obviously larger than we had first predicted, and then we were honestly expecting. So we worked to pare that down. It is important to note though, that just because it's more square footage doesn't mean that it'll ultimately be cheaper. New construction costs a lot, it does. But in adding more space, that might give us necessary swing space as we work through phasing that we don't have to do elsewhere. And it also might mean that we don't have to renovate as much space. We might be able to leave portions less touched or not touched, whereas in a denser scheme, we have to renovate more square footage. So that renovation square footage and construction square footage becomes important. And that's, when we get to the end of this, that's something that we're now starting to dive into so that we can get it to our cost estimators so we can have a path of that, what these costs might look like.
Richard, can I just ask a question? You know, this is kind of going back to our last meeting. One of the things I left that meeting with was that as far as the new construction is concerned, in my mind, there were two pieces that were being done because of the utility that they brought to the project. One being the vault, because we don't have anything like that now, and in order to, especially if we're moving the clerk's office, that vault gave us a utility that we really needed in the building. And the second thing was the meeting room, and the idea being that we can't do that in our existing space, because if we want to have, getting back to North's point, a room where we don't have these in it, it almost requires new construction. Is that a fair assumption, a recognition of what we got out of the last meeting?
I think those are definitely two of a few key points from it. It's not to say any of those couldn't work in the existing building, but it is certainly not the ideal. The vault wants to be,
Yeah, I just want to make sure I was coming from the right place, so thank you.
Yes, definitely the case.
Just quick, very quickly, on that same topic, you might want to put in that category, sometimes you put mechanical rooms and IT rooms in that category as well, because you want to create those spaces as new and redundant, so you can just switch over. So
Thank you.
sometimes you would really want those to be new spaces for sure.
Good, thank you for
Yeah.
And that's why you're the subject manager, expert.
In concept day, we reviewed the overarching in the last meeting, so I don't think I need to dive into it, but you will see in the concept, the updated version that we gave you, just that we flushed out more and proved that we feel it works, and there were smaller updates were made throughout it, but overall the concept's the same. So what I'll do is go over to B, the date. So that's page 13, I guess is.
I think it's 11.
Starting at 11. So
Thanks, Richard.
Ones that be the lowest level, the basement, in terms of addition square footage, doesn't have any substantive change from what we've seen before. We keep that the same. When we go up to floor one, there's really the key move is we reduce the amount of addition that happens right at the front of the building. See right here. On the police department side, that's going to mean that where we had shown records in courts and concept day is going to need to fit into the existing building. So we're working with the ADG right now about how to best achieve that, what things need to shift around, be cut down, and then review that with the police department to make sure that that's viable. But at a starting point, that's what would need to happen. The other thing we do that'll reflect on other floors is down in the custodial and storage area, we have a portion of the IT department there, whereas previously we had them all in an adjoined space. We have part of none there, and that can work. That can work with the department. There's a portion of their staff that is constantly on the road, facilitating calls and assisting all the time. So those staff we've located down there where it's easy access to loading dock in their storage room, and the more office type functions upstairs in their existing space. You'll see that.
That was important when they get a shipment of servers or computers that's right at the loading dock. They could be stored there instead of dragging them through the whole building.
right now it's drive through the building to multiple locations versus, so it'll definitely be an improvement, but it does separate them some. Going up to floor 2, sort of see the big move here to be able to take out some of that square footage is locating the shared training room on top of the new Sally Port. In terms of square footage wise, it works well. It does mean that that would become a 2-story addition versus a 1-story, which I know may be a sensitive conversation, something we can make look very nice, but it does have a bigger presence.
How tall is that gonna be since the last, double decker? I mean, I know it was more than that with the original plans, that people are gonna complain about the view. That's not my issue, but how tall is it and how much will it impact?
I don't have a exact height on it yet. We've gotten that far in Mac, figuring out whether it's, is it 20 feet or 25 feet? But yeah, I would expect that it will come up to, the bottom of the 3rd floor, maybe the windowsills on the 3rd floor.
And how far out? I mean, is it gonna impede the vision from Carthage? Again, I'm
Right.
just wanna clarify it now before, now.
From what we've looked at it now, my instinct is I don't think it would, but I haven't actually drawn a view line from the windows sort of closest to the building here
You can make
to see
you can
where that would.
actually see the
Yeah.
corner of the cottage in this aerial view. So in terms of a straight line view, at the extreme end of the building closest to the city hall, there might be some,
Small impediment.
yeah, it's not, still will be able to look over the pavement, so forth from there, so I believe it's much less of a
Obstruction.
significant left,
The previous
significantly less projection.
These
The
versions
fact,
were
the
3
fact is,
stories
it will definitely impact it, but in a much less way than previous schemes, much less.
it's a story less and probably a half to a third the length of floor.
And I'll just make a comment, since our last meeting, the council's basically authorized another 2 million spending unrelated to this. We're in a really challenging fiscal environment, so things like if we impede a view a little bit, they're really not to the overall, we have to find a plan that is financially viable. And if we get distracted by worrying about, how a 2nd story looks on a little bump out, we're not gonna get to what we need to get to, which is a economically viable police station.
I agree with that, but
So I think we should
have to
focus
be
on
prepared-
those.
We have to be prepared to, that's one of the major things that happened last time. So if the community is gonna raise up in arms against it, we should discuss it. I'm not necessarily discuss it, but be aware that that's a potential.
Yeah, and
Answer.
and a
An
reason,
answer.
a reason that we have this committee is that each of you as citizens have different viewpoints and that we're testing these ideas with you and you volunteered to help us do that. That's important.
Right.
The charge of this committee is to come up with a plan that we can recommend that not only improves the police station, but improves the inadequacies in the utilities in City Hall and the space requirements. So,
See Deputy Seating Manager Weber's comments about dragging servers from the loading dock to various places throughout the building. That seems like an untenable way to work. I'm not a server mover professionally, but it sounds untenable.
To your point though, one of the things that as we start getting into the massing of the building and what it's gonna appear at, we've started sketching some internally, but there would be views of what this obviously would look like. And the other thing we could do, I think relatively easily is, take a photo from within the cottage building or, close to it, and say, okay, here's your view now. Here's what would be obstructed so that that's clear. I think that's a very reasonable thing that people would wanna see.
Right, and again, I just know that that's gonna be a subject that comes up, so we should be aware of it. So we can handle it with the public, since this is gonna have to be sold to the public, so.
Completely agree.
Okay.
We also have to be mindful of the view lines coming across the pond too, from the other side. So whatever we do that camouflages an addition to make it look like the existing building would be helpful, I think.
Good point.
So would you say we're like a third of the way out to the flagpole.
Not even.
Not even.
So when
That's
you
like
picture
3
even
parking
where
spots.
the Sally Port was, there's parking spots there now.
Yeah.
And so this is just, that's the
That
area right there,
footprint.
right where those 3 parking spots are, that's the footprint.
Yeah.
It looked like it only took up 2 of the 3 spots.
I think there's what, 4? I think there's 4 there right now.
Are there 4?
I think we're 3 of the 4.
I wanted to highlight something about this plan that I thought was nice on this floor. The addition of a conference room that wasn't in the prior plan that sits kind of over to the side near the registrar, welfare, health. And the reason I'm highlighting that, I realize that that's probably shared for those departments. That's the way we've accomplished that. But that could be used by the public as well. And we know how limited space is in this room in particular. So there is a benefit to having an additional conference
Are you
room.
talking about the one at the main lobby?
No.
So the one over by
Oh,
the
okay,
registrar,
okay.
welfare,
Yeah,
health.
got it.
Behind the
I'm sure
assessors.
it's designed to be a staff shared space, but it would have public.
Where the current,
Exactly,
where the current vault is.
yeah, our intent had always been to have some more conference rooms on this floor that obviously would be predominantly used by staff, but would be public use as well, compared to ones that might be in departments that are much more isolated.
Can I just ask something? We're talking about that conference room, there are 2 toilets on either side. Does it need to be well,
See that?
you know, yes, because you won't be able to have a conference room, you're hearing the toilet flushing.
Yeah, no, that we can address very easily. And that's not
I
to say
know,
that they
but I'm
they
looking
won't.
at it, I thought, oh, boy.
But as we look at, but we at least
Especially
want
some
to
singing.
account
Right.
for a quantity and distribution so that, like you said, we don't forget them.
Does that show also right by that conference room, is that elevators?
Those are the existing elevators that would remain. So in this, all the schemes that we're carrying right now, we're maintaining the existing elevators, the 2 here and the one in Cybele, as well as proposing a new one right off the new main lobby. That then can bring you up to those upper floors.
And for those of you that wanna put eyes on that conference room, it's right there, it's that brick box that's right there.
It is
outside
currently the vault.
That is the
and-
actual room.
That's it.
And just to point out, on the option A, it did have a conference room for that health and welfare, it's just between them.
Yeah,
It's just smaller.
It was in
But
the
it was-
back and between them.
Storage.
This is a
But
nice
there's
location.
still a
Conference
Okay,
Yeah,
and then this is
for public
storage too.
access. It's a really nice location.
That's the blue is the registrar.
Which
So it has
you had
storage in it,
already.
yes.
You're right.
At some point, will you explain why they're seeing now the floor plans ghosted beneath some of these colored areas? That makes a big difference, because they hadn't seen that before.
True.
And it's an important change.
One of the things that we're starting to refine our thinking on is a sort of a anticipated level of renovation, places that we're going to be more or less relaying out in spaces that would be minimally touched potentially.
If at all.
Paint,
At all.
light, right.
Minimally if at all. How much is to be determined, but that would be the general intent. So some of those types of spaces we've started to show the existing floor plan beneath. So you can see the chief space, for example, here and HR here. Those are spaces where we're showing the existing layout as it stands today, and we would intend to keep it that way. So when we look at square footage cost of renovation, that would be 0 to little versus obviously more.
And there'll be mechanical stuff happening.
So have to get
Ceilings,
those.
but essential layout and floor plan.
That goes to the, sort of, why is there a range in the square footage? If you leave a space alone, it may not be perfectly efficient, so you're using more square footage, but the cost would be low because you're not really doing a lot of renovation to that space.
That's the balance we play and why we'll estimate multiple options.
The thing to keep in mind right now, though, is this is space layout, this is not construction. This is not how much mechanical stuff we change, how much we paint rooms or anything like that. It's really how are things gonna fit?
Yeah.
And then that further discussion is, as Richard pointed out, will play into the costing out and option A, which has a larger square footage, may be cheaper than other options because you one, swing space, 2, you don't necessarily touch as many things. in terms of renovations and things like that. So it's just, keep an open mind relative to, how things are gonna play out. It's really to show that here are the pros and cons and here are kind of the give and take of layouts.
The only other comment I would make on this concept, or two comments I make is one, we retain a vault. John's at the beginning, we retain a new vault addition off the back of the building. And then the one, decide how much of a compromise it is or isn't for yourself, is the point of service. When you look at concept A, the point of service is all centered right when you enter the lobby. You enter, assessor's right to your left, tax and clerk are right to your right, it's all immediately right there. As we start to compress the amount of additional square footage down, those start to get stretched out a little bit. So now the assessor space has moved back adjacent to where conference room A is, tax and clerk stay here. So again, they're still off the lobby, but they are spread out a little bit more. And you'll see that furthermore when we look at concept C. Just going up to floor 3 for this concept. The main way that we save space in this concept is really how we treated floor 3 and sort of the IT department. By splitting the IT department up, we move part of them down to floor 1, and then we've retained part of them in their current space on floor 3. What that's meant is that building and planning get pinched a little bit. We feel it can still work, but now where we had sort of conference room spaces in each of their sort of wings that kind of work nicely, those need to become shared amenities, shared more, hence the the diagonal hatch, because it's about 1,000 square feet of space that we needed to figure out how to absorb. I think that's an area where we can make it work, and it feels viable and can still work operationally. I think there's some tweaks to layout, but generally I think it can. But it is a little more squished than it was in concept A.
And the thing to note is that elevator right from the lobby goes up to this sort of essentially point of service for building and planning at that level.
That concept remains
Throughout all of them.
It's the shared sort of conference space that it's, I think, compromised a little bit, if you will. One of the things that we sort of discussed with planning and building departments was in the move from going from offices to more cube-like or smaller workstations, was having some smaller conference rooms, 2 people, 4 people, to facilitate the numerous conversations that currently just happen in their offices. So we planned on multiple smaller conference rooms. That number's come down a little bit from what we carried in the SNA. It's not far off, but we're down, I think, 2.5.
Can I ask, the elevators, are the elevators going to be private?
Private being like staff only?
Well, just for the detectives, I'm just thinking, you have these open elevators and for security.
We currently have them on card swipes, so no one can get into the PD unless their ID's in the program. We'd employ that same method.
Yeah.
Probably. I could see that being where it's,
Could you identify the lost conference space? I'm looking at concept C has 5 conference rooms, concept B has 5 conference rooms for planning.
So I'll use B as the reference here. So essentially what we have in concept B are 2 large conference rooms in this wing, here and here, as well as 4 smaller ones, 1, 2, 3, 4. They end up being actually a little bit bigger than our SNA called for because of the existing building, but they're 4 smaller ones. We originally intended 2 large ones and basically 4 small ones, whereas in concept A we had 2 large and 6 small. And it's worth noting that we're showing basically IT and building sharing that larger conference room. Again, they're all shared amongst all staff, but in terms of allocated spaces. So call it, if you included IT, it was 3 big and 6 small in concept A, and we're down to 2 big and 4 small.
Everything you have on the screen right now is minimal changes to the floor plan, actually. Probably the most is in the building department, but a lot of the floor plan already is configured like this.
Sorry if I botched that description.
I have a question around conference space for the building department. I'm just ignorant of this because I haven't been in a meeting on that side. Do they have a separate conference room even now?
They do not. So if they need,
A couple of years ago, we broke that up into offices. They had one up until 2 years ago.
Because that planning space currently is used frequently, but it's the only one. So-
correct, so right now, if they need to have an all-staff meeting and it's used up there, they just meet in the hallway.
They meet in here for their full step. They had it today. I was not part of their meeting. That they meet in here. They don't have one.
So it would be ideal, and then the other thing they do is they'll have, each of the inspectors might have meetings with, contractors, one-on-one or such that. Those currently happen for the most part in their offices, and that's where the small conference rooms came in as the way to facilitate that.
Keeping the director's office, so.
Oh, yes.
So that can still happen
That could still
on the
happen
director's side, okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's the case in any of the departments. We would always keep the director of each department in a private office. It's other staff where in some cases we've looked to move to a workstation model. But that's all been things that were discussed in our meetings with those departments about what they felt would or wouldn't be tenable. In this concept, floor 4, similar with concept A, legal city manager's pool would envision a minimal touch. It's really just where finance is moving up to where the health department currently is, where there's probably going to need to be more reconfiguration just because there's a lot more people.
That's good news. That so much of that floor remains the same. That's great.
Concept C is similar to be pared down a little bit more, and really where that shows up is on floor 2. So that's where I'm going to go to start. You'll see what remains the same between B and C is how we're dealing with the shared training room and that front main entry. What's different is the vault and human resources. So you'll see that in this concept, we're not showing a vault added to the north side of the building. Instead, we're showing it happening within the sidewalk building. Again, not ideal from a vault, but in the interest of trying to get rid of everything, that's one compromise we could consider. The other thing is that in doing that and being able to keep the vault near the clerk, we now need to look at relocating human resources. So in concept B, human resources, we essentially left minimally touched, untouched. We now be moving them over where health and welfare are on the left, so that we can keep tax and clerk all by. In terms of point of service, the other thing is that those windows, being able to fit the number of windows that we're ideally looking for, now get located along kind of the existing sidewalk corridor. So versus being right on the lobby, you'd come into the lobby, come into the elevator, to your left would be assessors, and then to your right would be the corridor with the windows sort of lining it. So things get stretched out a little bit more. But in terms of overall space program, all the pieces are accounted for on this floor. But I think the vault is a compromise.
Hey, Carl, between option B and C, is there a meaningful difference in the departments that are being moved and or what's being added from an operational standpoint? Is one better for you?
I think it'll come down to how we want the point of service to work and what the cost benefit will be on some of these. I think we may find that, this may require more work on the first floor, but doesn't give you an ideal point of service.
Yeah.
I think so those are things that we're gonna weigh as we get into the next round.
Yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is in terms of who works together, right? Like HR being over by welfare and health, and that reconfiguration of who's working next to whom and what that means in terms of the day-to-day workflow of your staff. Is one of these concepts and the way that these folks are co-located or not better?
I think we can look at that and see that those.
Because dollars aside, that's obviously the other consideration here.
The key adjacencies are retained in
Both
think pretty
plans.
much in all of these, the location of HR on this floor, whether it stays to the right, stays to the left is not, I think, critical. What's important to them is they're together and preferably on this floor because they do get foot traffic from staff coming from other
Interviews.
buildings, interviews, things like that. So it's
Got it.
ideal for them to be down here, but whether they're by health or welfare or over there is not, that adjacency isn't critical. Health and
Okay.
welfare together, critical, tax and clerk together, critical.
And the
I
vault
think- I
piece,
think
is
we-
that a big issue operationally
I
on the side?
I think it's gonna be again, in a perfect world, we build a vault that is built to be a vault,
Right, of
not sort of retrofitting something. I think for storage of those things, again, we'd have to worry about moving pipes and other things in those buildings.
Got it.
So I think what we may find as we get into this a little bit more is the adjacencies are here. It'll be which flows better for the public as well, which would be a big consideration. And I think that part of the goal is making it easier to access the services right off the lobby. And I think that's what we're eyeing towards operational.
Thank you.
And as I raised before, one of my concerns is the vault. And the fact is that, again, listening to the subject matter experts, talking about, the environmental aspect of maintaining the documents, et cetera. I don't want to give that up if we're not comfortable that the alternative will provide the level of protection that we need. So that's just an overall concern.
Sue, you had something?
Yeah, I was just curious because when I was on some other committees, I worked with Kelly and went to the vault quite often. But I never thought to ask her, how often does the city clerk have to go? On an average, I mean.
Well, I can tell you, sorry to jump in and ask, but we're doing some renovations to their space right now, just finished this new carpet and paint, and they've told us throughout the duration of any work we do in there, they need to, and they're in there daily. And they never know when someone's going to show up from travel from a distant place and say, I'd like a copy of my birth certificate, for example. So they need that at their fingertips every day, all day.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I was researching really old stuff that was down.
The adjacency to where their point of services and their workstations is important. It's not like we can say we're gonna look at the vault offsite or, on the other side of the building. They have, those two stay connected for how they use the vault.
When we met with them, they get very nervous when we talk about moving the vault. They don't like the idea of the vault being moved, but they know it has to.
Yeah.
Well, it'll be better.
Yeah, it will be.
Will it be somewhat bigger than what the space is?
Yes, so what we're showing right now in our SNA is basically, I think, doubling the size of the vault. And the reason is there's a lot of things that they have currently in the downstairs archive that really want to be up here, but can't be because they're out of space. So that was, in reducing the archive down there, we're moving items into here.
Thank you.
I just had a question on the point of service between the clerk's office and the tax. In this plan, they're right next to each other, and I've seen days where there's just a nice queue down the hallway. Does this take into account the space needed for some of those lines? Because we do actually get quite a line sometimes.
One of the reasons why we're sort of co-locating is to be able to have some flexible space when it comes to windows. So in a busy season with one, you could open more windows, and in a busy season with another, you could open. So that's part of why you're seeing these in a co-located space. We're trying to deal with the fact that the customer flow ebbs and flows throughout the month or the year. We're trying to figure out the best way to do it. We thought the initial is put it all in the same space so you can have flexibility in those windows.
And then in terms of the queuing, I think that is one of the things that you, in this concept, see paring down the square footage again, trying to compress things, is that queuing happens in a more narrow corridor compared to A and B, where it's much more adjacent to the waiting space in the lobby, so you have a little bit more breathing room for that queuing. So I think that's definitely you're spot on, and that's one of the compromises.
Richard, could you pull up the option B that shows the service area?
Absolutely. I can actually, do you want to see them both side to side?
That's great.
Wow.
Flipping between.
You can do that?
Comparing new cars.
I know that we have less than that later. So B will be on the left, C will be on the right. I'll cut off HR a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on, I need to reshare. It's sharing one window and not the whole screen, so apologies. There we go. So let me pull this over a bit more. There we go.
So in option B, the queuing would be, can you point out, so is,
Yeah, so here's the windows for tax and clerk, here's windows for assessing, so you would have queuing either, you probably have some waiting seats here, waiting here, but it's all close to where the windows are located. In C,
Queuing in the hall.
right, if we're queuing, unless there's a model like similar to, BMV, where you pick a number and then you go sit and they say, okay, number 5, and then you stand up and go, in which case you might be able to reduce the queuing that would happen here because people know, okay, I wait here and when my number's called, I come over to the window. That would be a way to, I think, help reduce some of that inadvertent queuing that occurs, but
Plan C also has some more challenges around security because of the crossing of the corridor, the public corridor for the clerk's office to go into conference rooms and to go into the vault. There's a lot of I'm gonna have to leave the secured space.
right, you end up with a sort of, we treat this as sort of like the front of office where anyone who's manned the windows day-to-day is here, and then the vault, clerk's office that are more behind, back of house or start stay here, and you do have to sort of badge in, badge out sort of, which can be done, but again there's a,
Less than ideal.
right, versus in A and B where you have sort of a contiguous staff space and then public space around. Like I said, there's other ways we could work any of these options, but at the end of the day, reducing the square footage, you're gonna have to start to split things up.
Less available meeting space. for people in
How wide are the corridors?
We haven't measured out. We would still keep in this side building, I think they're around 7-ish feet or so, and we would probably keep that the same. For in this building, there's columns that are in those walls, so
So what if somebody's in a wheelchair?
you can still do what you're. Obviously, if there's a huge queue in the corridor, that becomes much more challenging. But technical corridors, it's pretty sufficient.
What is the material made, the vault, what is it made of? Is it a special type of material that is made, that you build it with?
Not
or-
necessarily. Like it's not like not necessarily like a bank vault where you. I mean,
Right,
it can be, but it's more that the room is fire rated. Usually not just like a 1 hour tour. You're going
Right.
usually like 3. You keep all pipes and really anything wet out of there, so you do a chemical suppression system, and that it's very
Is
secure.
it ventilated?
Sure.
It must be, right?
As part of the fire suppression, there was ventilation shut off to resist spread of fire and smoke.
I like the idea of the waiting room with the number system. The line for like registering your car and stuff can be long, and it's not so easy for some people to stand in that line. So I almost see this as an improvement over what we currently have. And we don't have to stick to this model of long lines in hallways.
We're looking at those systems. Some other communities have adopted that, where you come into the first area, you say what you're here for, you get a ticket, and then the number just pops up. And what they found, the DMV has done that too, and they found that sitting and having a number and waiting for 5 minutes is better than queuing up in a line and waiting. So I think that's a great point, and we're gonna look at that as part of what we do.
I mean, anybody that's disabled or that has mobility issues, it's a huge improvement. My father's in a wheelchair, and if he lived in Portsmouth, for him to get service, he just wouldn't come. He'd send my mother. So he doesn't, but if he
Wouldn't send
did.
you, would he?
What's that?
We send you?
But that's why part of it is.
I don't accept those duties. I have other tasks I do for them.
So part of the trade-offs is that all the other adjacencies are there. One of the focuses, does the point of service meet the need, which one meets the need in a more improved way? And I think that's a good thing to be thinking about it. And what other things can we add to improve that service to the public as well?
100%. I also think that just not being on top of each other, right? There's a designated waiting area, you go sit down. For people that are still working, you can fire off some emails, read a book.
Right.
It's just such an improved experience versus standing in line.
What is it going to look like where people are gonna be sitting? Is that the waiting room to the left?
I think
So
that's
you'll
what
have
we're
seats
discussing.
and-
Yeah.
We'd have seats and areas that you could sit and work on things while you're waiting.
Nice.
Sue?
So between these two, where the waiting room is one further away from the windows are actually gonna be?
Looks like they're basically equidistant, but
Are
I don't have
they-
a slide ruler, so.
Yeah, they're similar, I think.
It just on
You
here.
could pace it
vision-
out.
Count the tiles.
I think the biggest difference is when you come into the lobby, one option has the windows readily available, the other one you have to go up and around the corner to get to the service
Well,
windows.
that's, yeah,
That's the biggest difference.
Yeah.
that's,
I think in a queuing, in a ticket type system, I think either one can probably viably work, because you'd come in, like in Concept C, for example, you get your ticket, maybe there's a desk there or something, get your ticket, wait,
Kiosk.
and then you know, okay, I need to come down here. But in a non-ticket type system, the lobby and the windows being right there is, I think, a big plus.
plus there's a kiosk system that they use like at,
Cheers are looking at the wind. Can I just ask a general question? What are you looking for us to do? Is this feedback helpful? Is that what the purpose of what you were looking for today?
I think all the conversation, the concerns, the things that maybe catch your eye is very helpful as we continue to go through and refine these three designs, these concepts. Then I think, once you get to the next phase, more feedback around sort of, the price tag, the look, the feel, the functionality. So I think what's been helpful is when all of you ask questions, we go back, think about it, and then say, okay, should we make some refinements to it? So it is helpful.
Okay, so the input that you get today, how does that translate into what we get next?
So there's things we already know we are going to do next, sort of regardless of the input, which is costs, phasing, there's those next steps. I think Susan's points about the view corridor, if you will, the view if you have a two-story addition versus one, that's something on our mind, but that's something we will make sure is very clear. Because if it's clear to you, then hopefully it's clear to any members of the public who are viewing this as well. And honestly, I think also just the questions you ask, then if members of the public are coming back and viewing this, we're hopefully answering some of those questions that they're going to have without it being asked, having to be asked 20 other times.
Okay, good, thank you.
So like, why is this vault so important? What does it actually mean for it to be a vault? Now it's clear. We'll understand.
In concept B, I like the fact that we're utilizing more existing space without renovation, leaving HR where it is, cuts down on costs, and it might be less expensive to build a freestanding addition for a vault rather than retrofitting space for a vault. So I'm sure this will come out in our next meeting when we get some pricing, but I think being mindful of using as much existing space as possible is sort of key.
Peter.
Kind of in retrospect, what you're saying is when you come back with your estimates, it would be good to break it down of what are the costs to upgrade the electric service, the HVAC, if it doesn't work now. What is the cost of construction for the police area? What's the cost of improving the municipal space, so that the whole thing together will be a big number, but each individual thing will be things that need to be done, whether you do it all at once or and do it in phases.
Want to see the menu, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
this,
like that.
we're gonna have levels of cost estimates as we refine our design. So I think what we're gonna be presenting next time will be more about there'll be different types of spaces. Is this a space that doesn't have a lot of renovation? The estimator's gonna say this is X dollars per square foot for the stuff that's in green. And if it's in red, it's gonna be, Y dollars and so forth. That's still more of an overall order of magnitude type thing, but as we get to a point where we're thinking about designs and phasing, those answers will become more obvious.
And I think that's gonna be necessary as a sales tool.
Yeah.
What's your contingency on your fees, on the conceptual level, the next stage, is plus or minus 20, plus or minus,
Well, a conceptual estimate's gonna have a percentage built into it to account for growth and stuff that
account
is
for
not.
mechanical, account for
Right.
electrical, account for,
Unforeseen.
all those things, all the
Yeah.
unforeseens. But
Yeah.
what are you carrying?
Defer to our estimators, honestly.
Yeah,
Okay.
What number they feel
My
is
point of bringing it
appropriate.
up is, you're looking for a really precise number. What North is saying is that it's not gonna be precise right now, because it's not a full design.
So what we'll be bringing next meeting is what we call a rough order of magnitude estimate, where they're basically doing it at cost per square foot. What we're going to do is we're gonna take these plans, take a first stab at phasing and levels of renovation, reviewing that with Peter, Joe, Carl, and team, see, okay, do we agree, like, this is what we anticipate we might need to do, what we might need to do, sort of get our assumptions out there, give that to our estimator based off, here's the level of renovation for this, level of renovation for this, so they can put a cost per square foot to it. And they're gonna take they're very good at what they do, but they're gonna take a stab at it off of incomplete information, off of what we know to date.
To that end, I just wanted to share with Rick Chelman, who's not able to be here. He did send an email and said, I think we used to have a summary chart of the options so folks can know what is gained and lost with each, including some rough estimates for dollars. So in other words, you can, I think he's saying, what's gained, what's lost with each.
Can
And you
you,
can
that-
attach, and
can
you
you
can
forward
ascribe a
that,
price to
that
the
email
gain
to
and loss.
Kyle so that they
Sure.
have it?
And I think that would be, again, feedback that's helpful, that makes a lot of sense that we could present that
Gains
here.
and losses on each
Like,
option.
there's a bunch of detail, but at the end of the day, here's the executive summary, concept A, B, and C, here's what we think they might cost at this point in time.
Can we put that on the dashboard? Can it just be another column on this? Because this document is becoming more and more useful and we're getting used to it. And maybe that information should live on here.
We can try, see if it becomes too,
I like that
if there's too many numbers on it or not. But
Just add another table and drop it below or something like that. Don't go crazy.
It's just because one other thing I wanted to make sure before we lost sight of that, if you compare option B to C, on the next floor up, there is a cost, there's a loss in the detective space. So again, I think that summary of each would be really helpful, so you know that what's gained in this option, what's lost in that option.
and to that specific point about what we're showing in safety space, I don't personally know yet whether doing that is viable. I think that's something that we're considering is, okay, could this work as a way to, can we take a little space out of there so that we're not pinching building and planning quite so much? But I don't know on the police side whether that's truly viable. Personally, I think from just a clean space planning, it makes sense to just take that wing and say detectives. And we know that's kind of a area that has growth, but we wanted to put that out there, and that's something we're working through to see whether that could actually work. But I don't have my heart set on that I more preferred giving detectives that whole wing. It's just clean.
At what point in the pricing process, do you start factoring in what it will take? Let's say phase one, and this is just a hypothetical, phase one involves the police station. To what extent do you know where the police need to be relocated while that's being done at transitional costs?
Right. We have to try to factor that in now because that can definitely swing the number quite a bit. When I first talked to our estimators a long time ago, he said, rough rule of thumb, though devil's in the details, renovation might cost 10 to 20% less than new construction, but once you start accounting for phasing and swing space, those can become pretty close to each other. So what we're going to do is, starting immediately following this meeting, is taking the concept as they stand right now and working through the first pass of what could that phasing look like. It's gonna change. It's not gonna be perfect for everything, but just enough to say like, okay, this might work, so that our estimators can start to price off of something. It'll continue to evolve, but that's something we need to try to account for now.
And will there be in that process back and forth with, for example, the police department?
Oh, absolutely.
And one of the things that we realized was it's easier to keep the PD in the building and move other people out because we can better secure this. So that's part of what we're looking at is how would we phase that? And that might mean displacing a different department temporarily while you're using that as swings. Or based on what options are picked, you might have some built-in swing space that you could create and then secure.
Yeah,
So I'm asking about phasing as well. I mean, clearly, the first floor space is mostly PD, so that can be done without truly impacting a lot of other departments as much. Unless you're moving people out to have swing space.
Bingo.
But that once you get to that third floor space, you have to move building planner in order to do the additional space. And that becomes much more complicated, I think.
It's
The first floor space, mostly PD, will have a big effect as it's being done on the police department.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, no, doing renovation in an occupied building is never easy. It can be done, it's done all the time, but it's not an easy thing to do. But that's why when we give our estimators this package to start pricing, in the next week, we're gonna take a first pass at phasing, Dr. Peter, say, okay, here's what we think might be viable, start pricing this. And then we're gonna continue to refine our thinking. We're gonna meet with the PD to go over also the detailed space plan like we've done on the municipal side today. We're working on that for the police department right now and then need the opportunity to review with the police department, get feedback while that estimating is still happening. So there's multiple things happening at the same time. But if we do this first pass, again, this gets us a rough order of magnitude, gets us in the ballpark of where do we stand? And also by breaking down that phasing, we can then start to look at, okay, if that number is more than we know is gonna be tenable for doing everything, where can we chop it for this project? And then, maybe we find phases 1 through 5 have to happen now, and that fits into this bucket, and 6 and 7 are ones that could become future things to be able to spread that out.
Councilor Bagley had his hand up.
Just last time we talked about it, and maybe this is a question for Carl, have we put to rest the idea of moving the school? Because I look at HR and I look at health, and I know we want to keep welfare with the police, and it just seems like that's really valuable real estate that could be used for the police or for.
Hey, Carl,
So I think-
didn't bring it up.
We had bets going.
They had a little wager.
Yeah.
But you did out.
I think, the city manager always looks at operational needs and where people should be located. I think one of the things that we know is there's a lot of the staff in the school that has to do with payroll, financing, and other things that you want to sort of stay adjacent to finance. So we're looking at that, but there's a bulk of that operation that really is consistent with the financial operations. So, she's still looking at that and coming up with what alternatives might exist one day, I think. But part of it is there's a lot of those functions that really should be adjacent to finance, not out in an elementary school somewhere. Because if they have a payroll question, they have to come over versus, someone right down the hall.
That may be an answer for the 3 council people. Who makes a decision on how the building's being used?
Just seems really valuable in a big chunk of space.
One of the other things is if you, let's just say, pick up on that. Let's just say that space became open. Does that really save any money? I mean, bottom line is that, as I understand it, and we've talked about it, we have some new construction that's going to have to take place because you can't do it in the existing building. So opening up that space, does that really save any money? And the other part of it is that, you know, which we talked about a little bit the last time, is that if they were, because it's not us, if they were to move school out, where do they move them and how much does it cost to get them in there?
I think the analysis we haven't looked at is, it's not a, you know, it costs nothing to move them and then we reclaim the space. There's a cost associated with that, with security and other things, because now you have public access in a school, and what would that look like other than a regular office? And we're keeping them in a space that doesn't really need a lot of renovation. So you'd have to compare that to what would it be to sort of, you know, do a renovation to something to house them.
And one of the reasons I keep looking at it too is, you know, when we talk about flex space, if that space was empty, that would create a flex space before we moved anything there in the building.
You could do the same thing with finance, you could do the same thing with any of the other departments. You know, set them to a flex space and just do that, so, I mean, I this is a question that's come up multiple times, and we will clearly
We'll get a
identify
definitive answer. We'll
where
get a better
in the
answer.
city charter it clearly spells out the city's management responsibilities and rules.
I think it's important to remember too that building this Sally Port with that big training room provides you significant, if you do it first, you have significant shift space. And as much as we haven't talked about it, the council chambers can be used for office shift space. There's no reason, I mean, it sounds awful, but there's no reason city council can't meet in conference room A. It would be a little crowded, we'd have to make sure enough people got in to, you know, hear, but we couldn't make adjustments. The city council could also meet at the middle school or the high school.
At the
So,
high school,
yeah, you can move people, some of these meetings off-site and utilize some of these bigger spaces as shifts.
Community campus, library.
Exactly.
We've fit this room out multiple times temporarily for departments. This very room, we've fit, you know, eight to 10 staff in here before for a short period of time. Well, whether it was COVID or renovating spaces, so.
This is where having, at least as we do our multiple passes, but especially our first pass of phasing and moving people around, where this expertise is super helpful because you've lived the doing work within this building many times before.
And you're gonna have to live with this decision. Come on.
Could I ask that we have some sort of procedure here? I mean, people are just jumping in and it gets very, well, it doesn't get confusing. It's just not a regular meeting. I feel like sometimes this becomes a free-for-all and everybody just speaks up when they want to speak up. I'm trying to follow what subject we're doing and why we're doing that. And with everybody just jumping in, it just doesn't seem.
Well, let's ask that people be recognized to speak.
Yes, I would appreciate that. My question is, and ever since I've come, even before I was on the committee, why the school area has become such an issue, because I don't hear, even with these plans, that we need all that extra room for anything, at least not in the next 20 years. So could someone explain to me why we want to free up that space? Because what is so pressing that we need to have that space for operations here in City Hall?
Well, I think if you add square footage without adding new construction, you've gained square footage.
But how much well, I know the front is talking about new construction. I mean, it's like, can we get a plan that says if we get rid of the Sally, well, not the Sally Port, but the rest of it, and we can utilize that space? I just don't see.
So far, the options that we're looking at are small additions that sort of incorporate in the functionality that's needed for the PD, Sally Port, booking, other things,
Right.
and the point of service and a vault. Those are the areas that really encompass additions. The rest is just reconfiguring space that's there. You know, we can. I don't know if it shifts a lot, because a lot of things we're trying to gain is really on that first floor and the PD operational space by freeing up some other.
I can see why this question is an important one, only because as much as we want point of service for everyone on the first floor, we are putting in an elevator that provides access for point of service. And you could technically put health, welfare, and this registrar's office in that existing space where schools are now and use that space for the shared training room potentially, although it's gonna have columns, just so everybody's aware. But it is feasible, so I think that's one of the questions that's kind of outstanding is maybe you don't need to build a shared training room in above the Sally Port if you can put it there next to the chief's space on that second floor, but then that's not as good of access for health and welfare. And so it's an outstanding question.
As you're drilling down more on, in more detail on the police department space, one of the things I learned, and I think others learned about Dover, is that there needs to be decent separation between social worker space and detective space or patrol space. They can't just be necessarily right adjacent to each other for a lot of privacy reasons. So I just want to let you know that. And we are, knock on wood, with the benefit of the executive council coming out the right way, soon we'll have 2 social workers rather than 1 social worker. And it's anticipated that it's not a department now, but that effort in policing will grow rather than shrink. So just keep that. That's kind of a separate space. You may be able to draw a line somewhere or a hallway or something in the detective's space. You guys can drill down better on where it would go, but I think it's important to understand that.
Other questions and comments?
Thank you.
So I guess just to kind of to beat the dead horse a little bit more, like when we talk about things like the point of service and these improvements, the additions, the way I'm looking at it is we're going to bond this for say 20 years and it's going to be X amount of dollars per year per household. If the point of service being better, which I would say most residents would appreciate that, if you attach to that statement is now going to cost you $50 a year more in taxes for the next 20 years. And the answer to that might be yes, the answer to that might be no. But I'm trying to think of not like, okay, we've got this ideal city hall and police station and everything works beautifully. But we have to recognize that there's a financial cost to that. And there's so many competing interests for money throughout the city, now more than ever with the changes at the federal and state level. We have to kind of put a price tag on all these, or at least in my opinion, we have to put a price tag on this. And then we go to the community and we say, we can make a beautiful point of service, we can have a sit-down waiting room, we can have this, but it's roughly gonna cost this much more in taxes. Or we can go with option B and, it won't be as nice and you'll still be waiting in the hallway, but it'll cost this much less. And I mean, my experience in Portsmouth is that people are typically willing to pay, not happy to pay, but they're willing to pay for improved services. And, I think most of our residents really appreciate the services that the city offers across the board and the quality of the schools and DPW and the police and the fire. And they're willing to pay for that. But I think we have to ask that question, okay, this is going to cost X amount of money. Is that the best use of those funds? Because it's competing with everything else in the city. And that's why I keep beating the dead horse of, space. And I think the other thing we see, like Buzz just mentioned with a social worker, we're never going to have enough space. Like there's always going to be some reason why we could use an extra 50 square feet for storage or another office or, as the city continues to grow, space will always, we probably won't have dead space, so to speak.
Renee?
Is there a chance that this never goes anywhere? It's not voted and it just stays the same?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is the challenge is that we have to be able to make a recommendation to the council that is approvable. So, and I think that that's a critical function of this committee. If we make a recommendation that's not, it won't go anywhere. So and it depends on this overall environment at the time.
Right.
you know, right now, the financial situation's not fantastic for the city, and unless some things change, we need to be as conservative as possible, probably.
One more question, can I ask? Is there another project that the city council is looking at as big as this?
This is the biggest.
Yeah,
All right,
this
or
is
the
biggest.
second or third that could sort
Well-
of tip everybody to say no.
For example, this year, suddenly, which we didn't have on our radar because it wasn't in the CIP budget, we received a request from the schools to approve a $12 million improvement at New Franklin School. That was absolutely not in our planning, but is absolutely necessary at this stage. So that's a surprise expenditure that we have funded currently in the CIP budget for next year. So that impacts all the other planning around what we're doing, and we don't know what else is going to come up. And we have a lot of older buildings, so you have to be thinking about, you know, what's the next thing coming up and making sure that we can fund those things.
So that
I would-
became,
I'm sorry. I would,
Renee, let's let Renee finish.
so the $12 million New Franklin became the first priority.
Yes.
I would point out, I know some don't want to hear this, but if this project went nowhere, it would create a very, very, very difficult situation for the police department. This is not a, we've been in the space we're in for 30 years, a space that was never designed as a police department. And it's getting harder, just as one minor piece of it, it's getting harder and harder to hire people who come and look at where we are. And we are in a significant shortage of officers as it is. And that's just a piece of why it would be very, very difficult for the police department if this project went nowhere.
Just remember, when it comes in as a phased project too, I think this is really important. That means the funding could also be phased. So that will also help the city, some of the pressure on the budget, yeah.
Peter?
One of the things that's true, but let's not kid ourselves. If we come up with a recommendation that goes to the council, I hope they will accept in total the recommendation or vote it down, but phase it and bond it over the years, but authorize the bond to make sure that there's no question that the work gets done.
Yeah, authorized it in the first vote.
Yes.
Sue?
I just have a quick question. I know August and September are like 8-9 months away. When I was on the archive committee, we planned during the sessions, not this early, but how we were going to sell it to the city council and to community. I haven't heard anything. How are we going to do it? Is it going to be more official, or just throwing it out there, like having a meeting, like you guys did, a work session, or is it going to be more public meetings like we held at the library? Those kinds of things, and because 8 months is not that far out, and if we really don't want it to go, just fail, we need to sort of have it in the back of our heads too, how we're gonna sell this, and that's part of the point of these meetings, is so that we're all in the same plane when it comes time to explain or convince.
Great topic for a future meeting.
Right, no, I know, but
It's something that Councilor Tabor and I can talk about. I mean, we might end up with some interim check-ins with the council, which it's always good to keep them on board so that they know what's happening.
And quickly, is this something that we could do not wait till the end? Could we do like an update thing for the community so they know where it's going and don't feel like, oh, this is all we have right here, that type of thing? Just throwing it out there.
It might satisfy the next item on next steps in meetings, which Peter's gonna ask about when we can have more meetings. That might give us the opportunity to have a few more meetings, to take some more public input beyond just these afternoon meetings.
Just as a follow-up, it may be good for this committee to have a public information session on what we've done at the request of the mayor, and with an update, and get the public's input of what their thoughts are and what they'd like to see.
Counselor?
I'm just looking at our time here. I think that's a good discussion of how we keep the council informed, how we keep the community informed. Do we want to continue that discussion today?
I just had a quick comment which continues that, but I think with the last time, what happened is the council didn't find out about the price range until at a council meeting. And I think that was a mistake. I think it's better to get the number out there and have a community discussion, because it's the community that's paying for it, so that when the council has to vote on the price tag, we have some public support, rather than the number just gets announced at a meeting and then we vote on whether or not we're gonna go forward or not. I think a rollout that's slower with more community involvement is gonna go a long way to getting this to pass.
Pick up on that. Unbeknownst to pretty much everyone, we scheduled 3 different public sessions as the original working group was in place, and virtually nobody from the public showed up. So I'm a bit cynical of the value of public sessions generating public support. There's other ways we need to discuss to generate public support, but I'm not a big fan, based on history, of just saying, putting out, we're gonna have a meeting, we'd like public input on this. Nobody shows up, and everybody shows up at the last meeting where it's an up or down vote, and everybody's got new ideas.
Would it be helpful for us to put that on the next agenda, communication with the council and also the public and the community?
Yeah.
Strategies too.
Yeah, and I was also part of those sessions. The method is open to all kinds of questioning, and we can beat up what's the best method, but the need to update the community and the council
Oh, I agree.
effectively.
I think the method's the question.
But is that why we have chairs there for the public to come and sit and listen? Okay, I just want, okay.
It is,
that's it.
but not everybody can come in the afternoon on a Wednesday. So
Right.
some of this, it's not just the public, it's the city council, updating the city council, because our city councilors all serve on multiple committees. They have a lot to keep track of, and so they can't all sit and watch every meeting.
And I think, when you want people to show up, and you never really get that many, but when you want them to show up, you put a number out there, or you put a massing diagram out there. Although I from a layperson's perspective, I think we should spend the money on a rendering, because as a layperson, massing diagrams always look terrible, and like communist block era buildings, and immediately don't garner any support. I think if we spend a little bit on a rendering so it looks like a nice building with windows, that may be better received by the public. But I think when that gets shown, and I think when a price tag gets announced, that's when we'll actually get feedback.
Well, the city now has the ability to do 3D modeling.
That massing exercise with the original working group was the death of that plan.
Well, and the wing, yeah.
Yeah, no, we have a better strategy for that going forward. Mark in our office particularly is very, very good at very nice illustrative renderings that help you understand the intent of what will happen without getting in so much detail that people are nitpicking small things or being so broad brushed as, here's a white box, it's not gonna be white, and then
People like, why is it white?
so that'll be sufficiently handled this time around.
Okay.
I think on
Yeah,
that,
we,
I think Andrew
Chairman,
makes,
and then we'll do public comment.
I think Andrew raises a good point. The timing of when we schedule those should be aligned with when we release certain things to encourage people to remember that this is happening and actually show up. Because as he pointed out, and John, you know this from being in the newspaper industry for so many years, when it gets printed, people react. And we should capitalize on that to actually get their feedback so that we don't go to that last meeting and have 60 people show up for public comment and say, you should vote no on this. And now we're back to where we start.
Andrew's saying make some news.
Flash vote? Can we consider, for not, maybe not for anything, about anything about this project, put out a flash vote to see what, I'd be interested to see out of 700 people, how many respond.
We have 10 minutes left and we can do public comment.
If you want to come up, please pull up a chair. Looks like we're short of. Okay.
Bob Gorash, I'm a resident of Portsmouth. I just have three things I wanted to ask. Number one, can you be a little more precise as to the distance of the bump out in front of the existing station? I know it has to wait till final plans. What are we talking about? 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet?
I'll reserve giving that for the next meeting, reason being that as we're working through all the space in the police department, we'll take what is currently the gray box that says Sallyport and make that more
Good.
intentional.
That would to me be helpful.
Okay.
Number two, has the committee decided to not have any discussion of a bump out in the rear of the building? Has that been decided? And if so, what was the?
Like a bump out to the sort of like at the back of the hospital building? Or
Yeah, or beyond the existing police department building toward that parking area.
back over in this way.
Yeah, to the rear of the building.
So we have, I think as a committee in the past meetings, we haven't talked about it internally as we've been trying these space plans and figuring out what we feel makes sense. There wasn't an option. We saw that made sense to do the bump out there. I think the Sallyport location really wants to be where it is from an adjacency perspective to achieve the police department's operational goals. And it didn't make sense to, I guess, bump anything out back there at this point. Well, yes, we considered it, but I didn't see it making layout sense at this point in time.
But nothing has been done in terms of the geology of the foundation to know that it would be prohibitively expensive because of granite or whatever would have to be done there. Haven't gotten to that point at all.
No, we expect that wherever we're working here, there's going to be ledge.
And then I'd just like to make an observation which isn't necessarily relevant to the committee, but so much of the discussion did bring it to my mind. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that over 10 years ago, there was a study done on the police station. And that study was preceded by probably a year of discussion or more. So we're here 12 years down the pike doing it again, which is good. But it raised in my mind the concept that the city has, I think, a capital improvement plan. But I believe that the capital improvement plan has a vision of 6 years, and it may be revised every year. But if I'm correct, and it only goes out 6 years, then I think this police station and municipal complex is probably a good indication that perhaps the city should consider going way further out than 6 years in the plans. This school system with $12 million appears suddenly, hadn't been there. There are a lot of other structures in the city, whether it's water treatment or water facilities, that may take more than 6 years. And even though that could be revised, maybe we have to go out 10 years or 12 years or 20 years. It's just a thought, and it's not this committee's responsibility, but I think the discussion here raises that as perhaps something that the council should, the city should generally consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob.
Petra Huda. So I've been following this since the beginning. Some of you remember I was one of the first ones who actually put the police facility and started giving them money for planning. So I was going to go in a different order, but something that was said was a little odd to me. And my question would be, you said next time you're gonna give the team a price out. So you haven't got the space study back from the police yet. So how can you begin to do that?
We have, sorry, yeah, my bad.
So the next thing, it seems like the focus has switched off of what the original plan here was. And that original plan was the police station. Now, as far as the architects and as far as anything else goes here, it seems like the focus has been switched and the police department has taken kind of the second stage here. So that was a little concerning to me as following this. So to me, the main focus should have been the police department first, not City Hall. As I don't know if anybody's aware, but a lot of money has been spent in remediation downstairs, and I can tell you the amounts, and also redoing the City Hall with new painting and carpeting, as was discussed by Joe. So I totally agree with Mr. Weeks here that a lot of the pricing is important and should come out first. The other expectation that I would have had as a taxpayer is the directive that was given, as Mr. Chelman stated last time, was to use the current space first. And everything that you have here and that you're discussing is with additions. So from my perspective, I would like to see that first as you fulfilling your original directive, whether it's higher, lower, or whatever. I think that should have been done first. The other thing here that when I was reading through the minutes, and I think it was discussed briefly here today, and Peter said the same thing. Last week, when Sue Sterry asked about the water issues and the stuff down for the police station, it was discussed that a new HVAC system was one of the primary drivers here. I urge you not to use the police station money to do this. Separate the cost out so you know what you have to spend on this. The city has already spent $2 million on the Band-Aids here, fixing that downstairs, and the spending should be for the police station first. That was one of the things that really caught my eye. The next thing on a lot of the drawings that was that I noted was that the direct entry path to the meeting rooms and the city council chambers was all jiggied. The most important thing that we have here is the city council that makes all the decisions on the money, and it should be really easy to get to that. I can go through the drawings and tell you, concept A on floor 2, the lobby, it's across the Portsmouth room, it's across the waiting room. From my perspective, that should be direct. It shouldn't be any confusion for any type of public meeting or anything on where they go. The other thing that was interesting to me, I think up on concept on floor 3, there was 5 conference rooms in planning. So I understand you're putting everybody together, but 5 seems a little too much from my perspective. The other question that came up with a lot of people was the school. Now, I personally don't agree with what Mr. Weber said as far as the school being here. If the school finance department or finance people need to be here, that's fine. But if we could use that space more effectively to keep more in this building instead of adding anything, personally, I think that would be more cost effective. Those are my comments that I could think of right now, but I would urge you to get a drawing of your directive first. As a taxpayer, I would really like to know if it's even feasible, and then move on to where you would even think about adding on here and there. And the other thing is, police department should be your first focus. That's where the money came from, instead of redoing the city hall and the HVAC in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Okay, next steps, we've got a meeting date coming up. I think we've got a pretty clear idea of the content of that.
Yep.
Anything just to close out?
Next meeting what you'd like to see is any revisions to the concepts we've seen to date of the similar level of detail to the police department that we've been able to vet the police department. And then rough order of magnitude costs based off of what we've done to date. That again, we're not precise to everything that we, because there's stuff we still don't know, but give us the ballpark.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
You got it.
Second.
Aye.